coursework or educational work?
I have. So after I completed my doctorate and my postdoctoral training, I obtained it's called a postdoctoral Master of Science degree in clinical psychopharmacology. That is for partial fulfillment of prescription privileges, meaning that it's part of what we need to be able to prescribe medications as a psychologist, because psychologists don't traditionally prescribe, and we can do that with certain military jurisdictions in other states. I also obtained advanced training in the Gottman method of couples therapy. I completed all 3 levels of training, and then I'm also a Gottman educator for several workshops involving helping parents learn how to prepare to bring their baby home and helping couples without serious problems improve their relationships.
All right. What's the Gottman method?
The Gottman method is a highly research-based method of couples therapy. It's very structured, so different than what many people expect when they think about couples therapy. I always tell my clients I don't want them to come in, just tell each other all their problems, and then have an awkward, silent drive home. In this therapy, they come in, they complete a really structured assessment in the beginning. So they complete a bunch of questions. It gives me a ton of information about their relationship before we even get started, and really identifies the areas we're going to target with structured interventions during each session. I think of it almost like a class.
Okay. Did you get, in the course of your education, any specialized training?
Any what?
Specialized training?
I did. So my internship specifically was dedicated to essentially working with post-traumatic stress disorder, traumatic stress. A lot of my training has been with psychological assessment and testing. And then my training during practicum and then in my postdoctoral work was dedicated to working with trauma populations and also conducting forensic psychological assessments. Oftentimes, forensic psychological assessments actually refers to doing testing and an interview and a couple other things for purposes related to law. So it's the application of psychology to the courts, to legal issues. And sometimes that also involves doing assessments for the military to determine whether somebody has sustained a mental disability after combat.
You indicated that you did some work at Tripler. What's Tripler and what's the work you did?
So Tripler Army Medical Center is a hospital in Honolulu, Hawaii. If anybody's ever gotten to have a vacation in Hawaii, it's a giant pink building there. And it's one of the top training sites for military psychologists. I was very, very lucky to be able to train there. They have wonderful funding and a lot of new research going on, particularly for PTSD, but really for all areas of mental health. While I was there, I did rotations in family psychology, so doing family therapy. I worked with children, but I also did a neuropsychology rotation, learning really the ins and outs of advanced psychological assessment, identifying not just mental issues, mental illness, but also traumatic brain injuries after trauma, and doing those PTSD evaluations, and then also working with service members who were struggling with a whole host of issues, military stressors, normal life stressors, and then also those who sustained tremendous trauma from combat.
Do you still continue to work with the military?
I do, actually. My practice is very focused on military service members, veterans, and their families.
Okay. What work have you done in prior litigation matters?
Well, most of my litigation, if we're talking about civil work, that has mostly been reports. So this is my first time testifying in a civil matter. The majority of my forensic work has been in criminal law or providing psychological assessments, and then I produce a really methodical report, which is typically reviewed by a judge, and a determination is made, or usually there's a settlement beforehand.
Okay. Do you work in connection with any particular courts?
I do. So I am actually not sure if I'm on the list anymore in Honolulu, but I am a certified forensic evaluator for the state of Hawaii, which means that I have been appointed by the court to conduct evaluations for matters that are presented. And then I'm also on the list of forensic evaluators in several courts in Southern California. And then I'm contracted by the military, the Department of Defense, now and again for evaluations of PTSD from service members.
Okay, you mentioned PTSD a couple of times now.
Yes.
What are you referring to there?
So PTSD is a mental illness. It can develop after a person has been exposed to a traumatic event. And our diagnostic statistical manual, the DSM, is sort of the authoritative manual of mental illnesses. It's considered our Bible of mental illness. We go there for diagnoses. And according to that, there's a specific type of trauma that a person must experience for them to be able to qualify for a diagnosis of PTSD. And that's an event that is life-threatening. It can also involve sexual assault, and you can experience that either directly, but you can also be traumatized if you've seen it happen to somebody else, or if it's happened unexpectedly or violently to somebody close to you, a family member or a friend. And then there's also a provision for people who are first responders if they're encountering really traumatic information regularly, that qualifies as a trauma. Now, there are a number of symptoms that can develop.
Sure. We'll talk about that some
Okay.
more. Do you hold any credentials relevant to the work that you do?
Well, I am a licensed psychologist.
Where?
In California and Hawaii.
Okay. And any other certifications or other credentials?
Not that I can think of off the top of my head other than the training with the Gottman method of couples therapy.
Okay. Have you worked with the Hawaii Department of Courts and Corrections?
Yes, I have.
In what capacity?
Well, so that I guess would be a credential. So I am a certified forensic evaluator for the state of Hawaii.
In connection with your doctorate, was there a research component?
There was. So would you like me to tell you about it?
Yes, please.
Okay. So I conducted a research study while I was at Pepperdine completing my doctorate. It's called a dissertation. So when you're obtaining your doctorate, you contribute something to the scientific field that you're in. And typically that involves doing what we call novel science. So you're doing an experiment, you're finding out new information and helping the field progress. So I did research in Peru, and I was essentially looking at the effectiveness of a therapy intervention there for kids who were growing up in this community called Ayacucho, which was exposed to 20 years of guerrilla warfare, the longest guerrilla war in the history of the world. And there were a lot of issues in that community, tremendous trauma. And my research was around finding interventions that were really effective for that community.
Where do you work now?
I work for the Curry Psychology Group.
What does the Curry Psychology Group do?
We're a multi-specialty mental health center, so we have neuropsychologists who do testing for kids. We have therapists, individual therapists, couples therapists, family therapists. We even have a meditation teacher. We basically try to meet the needs of our community, and we highly specialize in working with military personnel and their families.
Who's the Curry and Curry Psychology Group?
I'm Dr. Curry.
How many people work for you?
As of right now, I believe it's 13.
How long have you been doing this kind of work?
For about 15 years.
How much of your therapy practice focuses on treating individuals?
I would say about half of it is individuals, half is couples.
Okay. Do you do any training of students?
I do.
What's that?
So we have several unlicensed professionals at our office, and they're earning their additional hours so that they can get licensed. So they're able to see clients and then I meet with them regularly to supervise them, discuss their cases, provide them with information about different diagnoses, interventions, and treatment methods.
How did you get involved in this case?
I was contacted by Ms. Camille Vasquez, one of the attorneys for Mr. Depp.
Okay, and what was the nature of the contact?
Ms. Vasquez called me and indicated that she might be interested in having me meet the legal team so that I could discuss my expertise and possibly provide my opinions related to the matter.
Yeah. What were you asked to provide expert opinion on?
So initially, my role that I understood at the time was to review the case materials and provide my opinions regarding anything that I noticed that was consistent or even inconsistent with the psychological science that exists today on intimate partner violence in Mr. Depp and Ms. Heard's relationship.
All right, you used a phrase there, intimate partner violence. What are you talking about?
So there are a multitude of different definitions depending on the source or the state. But essentially, intimate partner violence is abuse. It could be physical, psychological, and it's from one partner to another in an intimate relationship.
Okay. Did your role in this case evolve over time?
Yes, it shifted. So I was retained at the end of January 2021, and then had just barely begun to review the documents. The case was postponed, and then in October 2021, I was asked by counsel to provide a psychological evaluation of Ms. Heard.
Okay. Were you ever asked to do a psychological evaluation of Mr. Depp?
No.
Okay.
What types of documents did you consider in this analysis?
So I reviewed quite a few documents as part of my evaluation. That included all of the case documents, Ms. Heard's medical records by Dr. Kipper,